Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Racha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Micah, the 4th chapter, which Micah 4 is mainly a prophetic chapter, right? The bulk, if not all, of this in here is really referring to the end times or a future time from when Micah had prophesied it. But as we went through in the 3rd chapter, right, Micah continued to rebuke Israel, right, for the wickedness, especially the ruling class, right, the nobility, the princes, for their deliberate oppression, right, and selfish deeds, and a system they had set up that way to benefit at the expense of the rest of the people, and how the Lord would bring judgment upon them for that. So in Micah chapter 4, verse 1, but in the last days it shall come to pass. Now, Micah 4 and 1, I believe, even up until about the 3rd or 4th verse, it's almost like parallel with Isaiah the 2nd chapter, right? Because they were both referring to the same thing. So, a direct precept for that would be Isaiah the 2nd chapter. But as it says, in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of the Lord Yahweh shall be established in the top of the mountains. Now, in the last days, these last days are referring to the end, okay, the very latter end. The scriptures mention during the time of Yahushua that basically that was like the beginning of the last days. But this prophecy Micah is referring to here is talking about the very, very end when we get delivered. Because that mountain of the house of the Lord, on a literal sense, we know that the temple was built in Jerusalem, which was, on a mountainous region. But the mountain here is a representation of a body of government or rulership. Okay, so the Lord's governing body would be, which is going to start with Yahushua, right? King David and the rest of the 144,000. All right, are going to be established in the top of the mountains. So the other mountains are representing the governments or the ruling bodies of these other nations, which signifies that Israel is going to be the top ruling nation. And it shall be exalted above the hills. So and a hill is a smaller mountain, right? So a mountain is much more it's much greater, you could say, than a hill. And that comparison is how Israel and the government of Israel is going to be in comparison to these other nations. And people shall flow onto it. So it's going to be the main the world superpower, you could say. As in different time periods, you've had different empires that have been the world superpower. Egypt, Assyria, right? Babylon, Persia, Rome. Okay, but in this time, it's going to be Israel. And this is going to happen in our time, right after the end of the destruction of this place. Verse 2, and many nations shall come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the mountain of the Lord. The many nations here is talking about the actual heathens. And they're going to come and reason with themselves and encourage themselves to come to the mountain of the Lord, right, to Jerusalem, and to the house of God, of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. And this is going to be because the whole world, after the Lord sets up Israel in authority, the whole world is going to serve the Most High. Obviously, these heathens are still going to be heathens, but they're no longer going to be following and worshiping idols and different gods and having different religions. They're all going to follow the ways of the Heavenly Father, the God of Israel, Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai. That's why it mentions here, come and let us go and let him teach us of his ways, right? How do we serve the Lord? What is the Sabbath? When do we keep the Sabbath? How do we do that? So You know, the instead of each nation having their own laws, so to speak, the whole world is going to be under one law or order, and that's going to be of Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai. As it says, for the law shall go forth of Zion, right? So Israel are going to be the enforcers and teachers of the law, and the word of the Lord Yahweh from Jerusalem. Verse 3, and he shall judge among many people, the he being Yahweh Shai, shall judge among many people and rebuke strong nations afar off. And what that means is, starting with Yahweh Shai, we're going to have dominion, okay, to govern, to rule, and to judge the world, right? That involves these other nations in different parts and different regions. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares. Now, a sword is a weapon of war. A plowshare is a tool of agriculture. And what the reason they're going to do this is because the world is no longer going to experience war. Once the Israel is set up, that's going to be synonymous with the kingdom of heaven being instituted here on earth. And so in the kingdom of heaven, right, during that reign or that age, there's going to be no more war in the world. And therefore, there's going to be no need for weapons of war, but rather tools of agriculture, okay? And their spears into pruning hooks, which is the same concept. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation. See? Neither shall they learn war anymore. So then you're no longer going to have nations needing to prepare their armies and militaries to to fight against this nation, and this nation is buying and creating new weapons. That's not going to be happening, because one, they're all going to be under us, right? Under our rule, under our authority. There aren't going to be any split sides where there's like the allied powers and or NATO, and then against, this other side. No, they're all going to be under Israel. And Israel is going to be a nation of gods on earth with spiritual power, with the ability to control elements, so there's going to be no rebellion. There's going to be no forming alliances with each other to try and come against us. None of that's going to happen. It's going to be actual peace. And once they, through that captivity of 1,000 years, they're going to learn and understand that and actually be grateful for that. Okay, because as often as war occurs in the world, it's not a fun or a beautiful thing, and people don't actually like war. But most don't have an option when they get involved in it. But under our reign and our rulership, there won't need to be any war. Verse 4, but they shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree, which means that there's going to be peace. And none shall make them afraid, which is dealing with Israel, right? I believe in the book of Isaiah, I forget exactly which chapter, but it says they shall not hurt at all in all my holy mountain. So no longer are we going to be afraid of, being either taken captive, having another nation invade your land, or be afraid of being a casualty of war. None of those things. For the mouth of the Lord Yahweh of hosts has spoken it. So the Lord has declared this, and it's going to come to pass. Now, why does every man sitting under his vine and under his fig tree represent peace? Well, in a time of peace, you would have your own land, right? And this is like just a general saying, right? But you would have your own land, right? You'd be able to plant your own, vines or figs, and being able to have the peace to where you, like it says, sitting under your own vine, not you dressing it for another person to reap off of it. Okay. But you being able to have your own and just relax under it is the sentiment of peace. Okay, more prevalent in the time of Micah, which is why he uses it as an example of peace. Okay, but the point he's making here is we're no longer going to have to worry or be lacking or be wanting. Verse 5, for all people will walk every one in the name of his God, and we will walk in the name of the Lord Yahweh our God forever and ever. Now, this may sound like a contradiction because above we read that they're going to come to learn of us and follow the ways of the Lord. Verse 5 is not referring to during the time of the kingdom, everybody's going to walk, in the name of their God. It's actually a general statement, but it's just worded where it sounds like it's something that will happen in the future. But really, all verse 5 is saying is, though, every nation has their own gods, right? And they live under the rule of their own gods. We will walk in the name of Yahweh, right? Forever and ever. We will never depart from our God. So they can follow their gods and do what they want, but we're always going to follow Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai. Now we know that obviously once the kingdom is instituted, they're not going to be doing that anymore. But it's more of a general statement, right? So when you look in the NLT, for example, right, though the nations around us follow their idols, we will follow the Lord Yahweh, our God, forever and ever. So it's more of a sentiment of loyalty or devotion to the Heavenly Father. Verse 6, in that day, and usually when you see the phrase or in that day or in the last days, it's prophetic. It's referring to the future. So in that day, so at the time when this happens, saith the Lord, will I assemble her that halteth. Halteth is like one that is hurt or maimed or injured in that sense. And this, when you look at this is the her is referring to Israel as a nation. So a nation that is halted, right, is one that is destroyed. It's not made. It's not whole. And the way that looks is how we look today, right? Not unified. Sick. Our people being sick, both mentally, spiritually, morally. It's just a broken down nation. But the Lord says He's going to assemble Israel, and I will gather her that is driven out. Once again, referring to Israel, because we were driven out. We were like unto a woman that was cast out, right, and basically put away by her husband, being the Lord, as we were also driven out of our land. And her that I have afflicted, right, and that's once again Israel, having been afflicted by the judgment or the wrath of the Lord, ultimately till this day in the form of the curses that we're under. But the Lord says He's basically going to reverse that. And I will make her that halted a remnant, right? So of us, of this destroyed nation, this maimed nation, the Lord is going to leave us or make of us a remnant, which will be those that are going to be delivered, and through them, the nation will be restored. And her that was cast far off, a strong nation, and the Lord Yahweh shall reign over them in Mount Zion from henceforth, even forever. So from the point where the Lord begins to gather His people back and strengthens them and builds of them a strong nation, He's going to reign over Israel forever from that point on. And there's that that peace is it's never going to be ended, meaning we will never be separated from our power again. And thou, O tower of the flock is referring to Israel, and the tower is referring to Jerusalem, the stronghold of the daughter of Zion, unto thee shall it come. The it being what? Even the first dominion. Now, when you look at the word first, Ra'ash, I believe is Ra'ashiath. Let's go into, the word first. Oh, Ra'ash 1, right? Ra'ash 1, you have the use of first in terms of time or position, but you also have chief in terms of degrees, right? As in the the first or the chief, right, or the highest, right? So here you have even first in place of time or rank. So we know where, and also it's spiritual because technically, right, we were likened onto the first, having the first dominion, starting with Adam. But also our dominion will be the chiefest of all. And it's going to come, which Jerusalem is synonymous with the people, okay? But it's going to come onto us. The kingdom shall come, the kingdom representing the rulership, shall come to the daughter of Jerusalem. Okay, so the Lord is going to give that to us. Now, and now in verse 9, it's here is a bit more rhetorical, okay, as Micah is saying here, basically, why are you crying now? Right now, why dost thou cry aloud? Is there no king in thee? Is thy counselor perished? For pangs have taken thee as a woman in travail. Because remember, even in the prior chapters, Israel had been basically going after their own way. And no matter what prophet the Lord sent to warn them, they didn't take heed. So so now Micah is saying, well, now why are you crying out? Right? What happened to the kings that you trusted in so much? What happened to the counselors that you chose to listen to over the Lord? Are they no more? But now, right, pangs and sorrows, as it says, have taken thee as a woman in travail, meaning now you're about to experience this pain and suffering, and you're gonna be like a woman that is you're starting to feel the beginnings of that, the hardships, like a woman that is in labor. Um, but why are you crying now? Verse 10, be in pain and labor to bring forth, O daughter of Zion, like a woman in travail. Meaning you're you're gonna be like a woman that is going through this birth pains, from the point of contractions to the point of the labor pains to the point of pushing, and all the pain that a woman that is in labor has to go through, right? That's what it's gonna feel like for you. But why? Right? Why is he saying, you're going to be in pain like that? Because of this, right? So as it says, for now shalt thou go forth out of the city, and thou shalt dwell in the field, and thou shalt go even to Babylon. There shalt thou be delivered. There the Lord Yahweh shall redeem thee from the hand of thine enemies. Now this is a prophecy, okay, because and it's not talking about the time when Israel went into captivity under the Babylonians in ancient Babylon. Um, this is, even though we did go into that captivity after the time of Micah, this is referring to this second Babylon where we are currently in captivity till this day. So as it says, for now shalt thou go forth out of the city, right? The city representing Israel or Jerusalem. And we were going to go forth. And also this time was during the time of the this before the siege of Jerusalem, right? When the Romans came against Israel. And even Daniel prophesied about it, and Yahushua also mentioned it and prophesied about it, right? But we would go out forth out of the city, which would be to flee out of the city, and thou shalt dwell in the field, which were the different areas that Israelites fled into, different parts of the world that Israelites fled into, fleeing from the flood of the Roman armies. And thou shalt, and the bulk of Israel went into the interiors of Africa because they were familiar with that terrain or that territory. And thou shalt go even to Babylon. Now, when it says thou shalt go even to Babylon, it doesn't mean that go as in you're going to, find a boat and then migrate to Babylon. What it means is you're going to be taken there. You're going to end up here in Babylon. And the Babylon here is dealing with America. Okay, and the way that we came to Babylon was not by way of our own will per se, but through captivity or slavery. That is why it will be likened onto being in pain as a woman laboring to bring forth. But here, right there in Babylon, shalt thou be delivered. There the Lord Yahweh shall redeem thee from the hand of thine enemies. Now in ancient Babylon, it wasn't necessarily like we were delivered per se, because when after the Babylonian captivity, when the Persians took over, you actually had, when Cyrus said, hey, anybody that wants to go back to rebuild the temple, you can go ahead. You had Israelites that decided to stay because they had houses, they had families, they had a life in Babylon. So though we were captive, right, as in we weren't in rulership or authority, Israelites were still living. And when when our people came back to Jerusalem, right, to rebuild and so on, It wasn't like they needed deliverance or redemption, so to speak. This deliverance and this redemption here is the salvation that the Lord is going to bring from this captivity that we are in till this day. And that's why in Deuteronomy, in the curses, it says, "And no man shall buy thee," meaning nobody shall redeem thee, in Deuteronomy 28 and 68. So this would be the place where we would need to be redeemed from. That's why Yahushua mentions, right, it's in Isaiah that the day of his redeemed is come. So all that points to here, Babylon, in this time. And this is where we're going to be redeemed from the hand of our enemies. Now, being delivered, right, there thou shalt be delivered. Being delivered and redeemed from the hand of our enemies still kind of falls under this comparison here, because after the woman travails, eventually she is delivered of the baby, and then the pain stops, and then comes the joy. And so our travail was likened on to the things we suffered at the hands of the Romans, having to flee, right, and then being taken to Babylon to serve captivity over there, and the things that we've had to suffer all the way over here. But at the end of all of that comes the relief or the deliverance by the Lord. Verse 11, now also many nations are gathered against thee, that say, right, Psalms 83, that say, let her be defiled, and let our eye look upon Zion. So we have basically all these other nations look upon us with the mindset of rejoicing that we are in this low position, right? Eager to see us fall, basically. Verse 12, but they know not the thoughts of the Lord, neither understand they his counsel. So they don't understand that the reason we're in this condition is not because the Lord has forsaken us, okay, by which they're happy in thinking that. It's because the Lord is punishing us, but it's not going to be forever. So the nation of Israel will not see his demise, contrary to what these other nations might think. But once again, they don't know the intent of the Lord. They don't know his counsel. For what he's actually going to do, right? For he shall gather them as the sheaves into the floor. So now the nations are likened on to a harvest, right? The Lord is going to gather these nations and bind them up like sheaves. You can look up what that is, onto the floor being the threshing floor. Arise and thresh, O daughter of Zion. So the Lord is going to flip the tables to where these nations were looking and eager to see our downfall, the Lord is going to flip the tables and have them be under us and give us the power to be the threshers, and for them to be the sheaves and being threshed on the threshing floor. And what that looks like is the Lord delivering his people, giving us power to actually tread upon the nations, break them down, subject them, and have them under us, and then reap their benefits, which is what happens after you thresh the sheaves on the floor. You get the grain, you get the husk off of it, and then you get the actual beneficial part of it. So as it says, O daughter of Zion, for I will make thine horn iron, and I will make thy hooves brass. And this is now likening Israel to like an ox, right, or an animal that, sometimes they would have the animals walk on the threshing floor to tread upon the sheaves to break it up, to get the husk off of it. So making the hooves brass is like, you're not just a regular ox that's using your weight, and your natural given hooves. The Lord is going to fortify that. Okay. And thou shalt beat in pieces many people. How are we going to do that now? We don't have power for that. But once the Lord comes, he's going to give us the power and the ability, spiritual power, to be able to actually break down these nations. Because they're going to have military weapons. They're going to have military troops. They're going to have all of that. But we're going to have the Lord. And I will consecrate their gain unto the Lord Yahweh, and their substance unto the Lord of the whole earth. See? And so we're going to have dominion of these nations, and we're going to subject them, and we're going to gain their resources, as it says here, which will be consecrated unto the Lord. Okay? And ultimately what that would end up as is for us, for our benefit. And that brings us to the end of the book of Micah, the 4th chapter. So as you can see, it's mainly prophecy about what the Lord would bring to Israel in the last days. But majority of it is going into the mercy, right, that the Lord is going to bring to Israel. So with that, Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rechak Wadash. And until next time, Shalom.